Hello, boils and ghouls. I of Blackstone here with another episode of Behind the Keyboard. Today, my guest is Lee Murray, author of Into the Mist, Grotesque Monsters, Black Cranes, and co-author of the Book of Ra series with Dan Rabbits. If you like the video, please subscribe and, of course, like the video and enjoy. Okay, great. Thanks for being here, Lee. Honestly, I was a little nervous about having you on. I'm a bit of a fan.
Oh, really? Oh, thank you, Richard. That's so kind. It's so
Yeah,
kind.
and to be honest, I actually first heard about you when you signed with Severed Press, and Into the Mist was the first book I read from you. And yeah, it's just one of those things. We've interacted a bit before, and I was nervous about having you on since I am a fan. It's strange.
Really? Oh, that's really, really kind. That's so nice. There's nothing. That's kind of why we write, isn't it? So people, if a story resonates to someone and they contact you and they say, "Oh, wow, I really enjoyed this and this spoke to me," you kind of that's there's not a lot of reward in writing, and so those moments are the things that really light you up and make keep you going and keep you doing the research and those long hours at night and yeah,
Oh
that thank
yes.
you. So thank you for that. That's really
Oh
lovely.
no.
And especially since you've got quite a backlist yourself, you've got quite a long list of
Ah.
fabulous pulpy high action stuff. And I see you put this, what is it, Road to Beechu? Is
Valley
that
of
your
Beach,
new
the Valley of Beach.
Valley of Beechu? And interestingly, I'm looking for, I haven't read it yet because it's just come out, hasn't it?
Back in
And
February. Yep.
yeah, well, that's what, a month ago. It's not
Yep.
very long ago.
No.
So, and you're sorry, but my to be read list is as long as your arm. And I was reading this last year for a literary award, and so kind of all my spare reading time, I was tied up reading 40 novels and things. So yeah, so my reading list is a little bit behind,
Oh no.
but I see that has kind of well, there are no new stories, but I see it has a similar sort of premise to Into the Mist. You're off on one, a group of soldiers or a team are sent off into the forest on one mission, and that becomes some other mission or some other
Yep.
problem, and that kind of misdirect is just a wonderful way to get into a story. So your cutthroats are kind of a little bit in the same sort of situation as my New Zealand Defence Force soldiers in Into the Mist. Is that right? Is that where am I getting the same vibe? I sort of
Basically,
when I
yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, the cutthroats are Australian as well, so it is keeping it localized. And the way I tell everyone is, it's just basically Predator, except not with an alien.
Right, right. Well, isn't that interesting? Because I got a review from Tor on Into the Mist, and it said this is Predator but ramped up 50 times, and I thought, oh, that was just one of the best reviews, obviously. And I mean, there are no new stories, but there's these new twists on stories, and of
Uh-huh.
course, it is all about the character and how your characters are affected by this particular thing and how they behave, and everyone behaves differently under stress, and everyone's fears are different. So, and particularly, if you've got this team who are talented and skilled, how do they address these different challenges, which is kind of how we do writing, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
We set up a character and then we just throw this stuff at them and see how they behave, and that's the fun of it. So
definitely.
so have you pulled in some outside mythology, or what kind of set you down this track?
In regards to Valley of Beach, or just in
Yeah, yeah. I
that.
mean, because I think though there's some definite parallels between the two stories, right?
Oh, definitely. And I mean, now that I think about it, it's probably a bit of a homage to Into the Mist to a certain level, without fully being aware of it. Because what happened with that one is, living in Mexico, you get to interact with scorpions and all those sort of things, which, if you're not used to it, can be a little scary. And I kind of always like the idea of taking that and kind of, imagine you fought a tank-sized scorpion. And I had the idea end of 2019 of, okay, wanting to write that story with a tank-sized scorpion, okay, who's the people you put up against it? It's going to be mercenaries. It's going to be a special forces team. It's going to be those badasses. And I was like, well, where do I want to set it? Not in Australia, because you don't get a lot of scorpions in Australia.
Well, there's everything else in Australia, let's face it.
Exactly. And
anything that kills you lives in Australia, right? Pretty much.
Yeah. Never.
Go Aussie.
No one's ever said that to me before. But yeah, it was that sort of thing of, okay, it's got to be set in Mexico. Where can I set it? And there's this massive area called the Lacondan jungle, which is one of the biggest rainforests and tropical jungles. And there are rumors of a tribe that lives there that, they basically rob the tourists and all this. And it just was one of those things, yeah, that's a good place to set it. Now, why would there be these Australian special forces coming in? Okay, they're going to be extraditing a drug lord. Very, very stereotypical. And it's just, okay, I wrote I kind of went, yep, I like the idea. Wrote out a very, very simple pitch, sent it to Severed Press, and they went, yep, write it for me. I was like, awesome, I sold a book. Oh, hell, now I need to write the book.
Yeah. Yes, it's a little paragraph pitch is quite different from actually writing an 80,000 word book, right?
Oh, yes. and I mean, Valley of Becho, that one, that was the end of 2019. 2020, I became depressed. COVID happened, and I didn't get to it until the end of 2020, and I finally got it written. And it was like one of those things of, it felt so.
2020. Oh wow, that's really fast. You were quick.
Well, yes and no, because I didn't do any writing. Basically, once COVID happened, I think it was like from March to about October, I didn't do any writing at all, just because of a lot of the personal things happening with me.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, okay, I've got to write this book, and I did I did about 10 outlines. I wrote 50,000 words for NaNoWriMo last year, which I then threw out because it was shit.
I think that's true of most people's NaNoWriMo efforts.
Yeah, I'm positive about that. But when I say it was shit, when I say this 50,000 words, like, it was an entire novella. It was the entire book, 50,000 words, wrote it all. And I went, no, I know for a fact that is terrible. Got rid of it. And then just did a quick, then I rewrote it because I gave myself a personal deadline of, I want to get it done by the end of 2020. And, oh, you got a friend there.
Yes, she likes to share my chair, and so she's kind of pushing me off, aren't you? Hey, this is Bella. Say hello to Richard.
Hello, Bella. So yeah, and I am a fast writer. Once I get into a rhythm, I can go fast. And yeah, it is one of those things when I think about yeah, as I said, it is definitely Predator, and yeah, in a way, it is a homage to Into the Mist, which unintentional, it's totally unintentional.
But there's always space for another creature feature, isn't there? There's always space for that, where people love those things, and I think they do address, they're a metaphor for everyday fears, particularly kaiju, with urbanization. I mean, the whole Godzilla kaiju sort of genre is all about dealing with, the whole idea of urbanization and look, really, you're really overtaking this conversation. Hop down, please. And those kinds of big fears, and for us in New Zealand, it might be an earthquake or, those kinds of underlying fears that simmer. And I think so, using these creature features is really good a way to address those sorts of things, in a safe way.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That is why we write sort of action horror, is because it's a way of addressing these things in a safe way with some distance, and also because they're hugely entertaining. I mean, they don't get old, do they? I mean, Severed said to you, oh yes, please, because that's something that their readers absolutely love. And so congratulations too on getting it on a pitch. So that's testimony to the fact that you obviously know what you're doing, and Gary clearly likes what you do. So that's brilliant.
Well, I mean, I also did the same thing. I came up with a pitch in 20 minutes, sent it to him. He went, this is great. He literally goes, this sounds really fun. Here's the contract. I'm like, great. Oh, hell no, I got to write it. which
Well,
is
actually,
good.
I did the same. I did the same with Gary. When I came, the Into the Mist was originally with Cohesion Press, and they moved to short story, specialist short story,
Hmm.
military fiction, and so when they did that, they let all their novel contracts go. And so, um, I went to Gary, and he said he was very keen to have it, which was really lovely. In fact, I had three publishers interested in it, and
Wow.
yeah. And then I said, well, at that point, the Cohesion had already asked me for a second book because it had been their bestseller for the year that it was out, and in fact was only out for 8 months, and it had been off the market for another 8 months. And so but in that time I had written a second book, which I hadn't expected to do, because I sort of written Into the Mist as a one-off. And then I'd also, because I'd also thought, well, this book doesn't really finish, and I want a third book. So well, it does finish, but there was a longer story arc that I wanted to complete.
Yep.
So I pitched those two just as paragraphs to Gary, and he liked the ideas too. So yes, it's a nice way, isn't it? But then you're under pressure to get them finished, and you
Yeah.
also are under pressure when it's a series to have that same feel. So that is always the tricky part about a series, isn't it? Because readers want more of the same, but you don't want to write the same story. You want
Yep.
something you want to offer something a little bit fresh, and also that character needs to develop a little more, not just the same. Well, you can't write the same story. Who wants to
Yeah.
buy the same story and read the same story? Um, but then again, I know that readers of Into the Mist will love to read your Valley of, now is it Bicho? Bicho? How do you
Bicho.
say that?
Bicho.
Bicho,
Yeah.
yeah, because
It's
that.
a Spanish word. It's Mexican for bug.
Oh, okay, right, okay.
So
Sorry,
yeah. No,
excuse
no,
my ignorance.
no.
Yeah, no, I think that's
I did that on
fantastic.
purpose. That was on purpose to anyone who knows Mexican Spanish or Spanish in general, and they'll read that, they'll instantly go, okay, I know what I'm in for if that, and just from the cover alone with the giant scorpions, you know
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you.
good cover. Great covers. They do great covers.
Oh
They're
yeah.
really full of energy, and yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that, and also I like the fact that you've put it in the forest, and there's that different atmosphere, that different the different cultural aspects that you need to bring in,
Yeah.
which I think people are interested, because when you go and read a book, you want to be transported somewhere else, out of your everyday. I mean, because every day, just recently, we've all been in our pajamas, and I'm sitting around watching Netflix and reading books, and
Yep.
you want to escape from that, and you want this opportunity to travel somewhere, because none of us are traveling right now. um, Somewhere lovely, somewhere different and
Yep.
exciting and exotic, and to explore those other cultures. So I do think that there's an opportunity to do that with these types of books. And I know one of the things that people have said to me about the Tane McKenna series is that they're all set in New Zealand national parks,
Yep.
is that I love I want to come to New Zealand, and I don't know anything about it, and you've just painted this picture for me, which is fabulous. And I think that being transported somewhere is an important kind of part of fiction, just offering that glimpse into different worlds that other people don't necessarily get an opportunity to see. So
Definitely,
um,
definitely, and I wanted to know, with Into the Mist. Okay, where did that come from?
oh, okay, so it's interesting. Back in the day, and this was, I think, in 2014. So I'd been writing about 5 years, and I had about 4 books out, 3 books out by this point. And back in the day, I was I was a runner. I was a long distance runner, so I used to run marathons. I'm very broken and injured now, so don't do that. But my first book was about running marathons, and so I used to run ultra marathons and what have you. And I was out in the forest with some girlfriends doing a long run. So we were out running 36 kilometers or something like that, 20 miles. for the for the North Americans who are listening in. Um, and in New Zealand, unlike Australia, there are no beasties. There's nothing to eat.
Oh.
We were out in the middle of the forest. We were in the middle of the forest, like 20k out, and we're going, wow, there's nothing to, there's nothing to eat you. It's so cool that we can go for a run for, 4 hours or however long, because trail running takes a lot longer, and
Mhm.
I'm quite a slow person. And we were saying, well, isn't that just fantastic? Of course, there are other things in New Zealand. You could get caught in a flash flood, or the weather could change. I mean, we can get some quite dramatic weather changes,
Mm.
but you could fall down a cliff, and the terrain is difficult. But in general, there's not like Australia, where just everywhere you turn, there's some kind of spider or a snake or something to kill you, basically.
Ah.
Yeah,
It makes life.
drop bears.
Ah. Hey. Drop bears are an endangered species, okay?
And so, yeah, so I thought, what if? And it was also kind of around the time I was thinking, am I going to make this thing a go? And I really want what's going to appeal to lots of people. And anyway, I came up with this idea, what if? And I'm really fascinated with our, local culture and local mythology and the taniwha. And there's a lot of evidence that actually in the Uruweras, therodons actually roamed at some point. So,
Okay.
and one of a sort of a local um, scholar, if you like, because she didn't have any formal qualifications, actually discovered a theropod toenail in the Uruwera ranges. So,
Oh.
so they did actually previously exist, and of course we've got this creature called a sphenodon, which is a tuatara, which lives in its own little, family on the kind of um, what do you call that, the tree, the sort of, in terms of species.
Mhm.
And, so, well, classification, that's what it is. And it has its own little prong on the classification, family tree. And so I thought, well, what if? And so I went straight home from that run, and I had my shower, and then I opened a file and I wrote global blockbuster on the file name. That is the file name. Original file name was Global Blockbuster. And while it was not a global blockbuster, it was kind of, for me, a breakout novel. And I remember Alan Baxter, Australian, award-winning Australian dark fiction writer, lovely man. And he said to me, he congratulated me on my first novel. Well done. I'm going, actually, news of my
Wow.
news of my first novel are sort of greatly exaggerated, because it's actually novel number 4. But clearly it was the thing that kind of gave me that little boost. And I think that was that whole idea of nobody had seen this done in a New Zealand story.
Yep.
There was no, and a lot of the reviews were along those lines. Oh, well, look, I've seen lots of, Navy SEAL teams, etc., but nothing ever set in New Zealand with this New Zealand mythology. So that was nice. So that was kind of where it came from.
Okay.
And but also I kind of see myself, Richard, as a sort of Kiwi writer. I am a New Zealand writer first, and
Yep.
I sort of I feel like it's important that people see New Zealand. We've got so much talent down here, and so much beautiful landscape, and wonderful stories that need to be told. And so if I can play a little role in telling some of those stories,
Then
and introducing people to our landscapes and our mythology, then that's cool as far as I'm concerned. That's you know that's the job done,
yeah.
really.
Oh no, and
uh,
it makes perfect sense. Because reading it, I will admit, I haven't read the sequels yet. I've read Into the Mist, Grotesque Monsters.
oh,
I,
thank you.
I've read a bunch of. It's just that I haven't read. I've read a bunch of your other stuff, just not the sequels to Into the Mist, which is really strange. But you do get a great sense of what New Zealand is like. Like you do get that feeling of being there and experiencing New Zealand without having to go. So yeah, you've done your job perfectly with that. And
Well,
I mean,
thank you.
oh no,
Yeah, well, I think people should still come, because we want you to come when the pandemic's over.
Yeah.
We want you to come. And actually, it was really lovely because Cohesion managed to get me a blurb, which is, the thing that goes on the bottom of the book from Greg Beck, who at the time is like, it's like, I just like I could just, and he's a friend now, obviously, so that's a really big step in my. I mean, I just danced around the room when Jeff Brown said to me, "Oh, well, look, who would you like to blurb it?" And I went, "Oh, and I said, "Well, dream blurb, can you get me Greg Beck?" And he went, "Oh, well, I'll have a go." And he comes back and he gets it. And actually, I have met Greg, and he's just an absolutely lovely man. He's been very supportive, but he's married to a New Zealand girl. And so
Okay.
yeah, so then he said, when I read your book, it really took me back there. It took me there. I know New Zealand, and it took me there, and I really, that's what really kind of that sense of place really did it for me. And I thought, oh wow, then that's a win, isn't it? When someone of his caliber, because I
Yeah.
absolutely love Greg's story. I mean, he just takes you somewhere different. And how, to be honest, Beneath the Dark Ice is probably one of my favorite books of all time, Greg's. But I love that I remember reading that. My husband was away, and I was, staying up late to read Into the Dark Ice, and I had to put it down because it was just so terrifying. That whole under the ice, and we're close to Antarctica here, so
Yeah.
you know, I thought, "Ooh." So he has a real powerful way with words, and that taking you somewhere different. So yeah, in some ways that was kind of what inspired me. And at the time, I started when I started looking for publishers, I kind of looked for publishers who were also publishing people, whose books I loved,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how we do these things. So it was, I don't know, just kind of came together. So a little, well, there's so much luck in these things, isn't it? Because there are a lot of very good writers who don't get a break, and
Mm.
yeah. So, and thank you for mentioning Grotesque, because super proud of that. It's my debut collection, and a nice way to sort of showcase, some other sorts of writing that I do. So,
Yeah, because I mean, there are some authors who just, they just get labeled as being this, like extreme horror, cosmic horror, action horror, creature features, and being able to do something like Grotesque, and the stories in that are amazing, and that cover is brilliant.
oh,
Um,
this cover, yes. This
yep.
isn't it lovely? There's a story to this, Richard, because Things in the Well invited me to write this collection, which is, they'd actually been asking me, courting me for a while about it, and I just kind of didn't feel I was grown up enough to write a collection. Does that make sense? It's very strange, and
It does.
yeah. Anyway, so I put this together in Monster Stories, and this is the first story in the collection. It's called Grotesque, and it's set in France. I lived some years in France, and I visited. The Clos de Luce, and also, in Amboise, the
Hmm.
chateau there. And there's actually a little tunnel. It actually exists. It runs between the two because Francois Premier was very good friends with Leonardo da Vinci, and he was his chief engineer, if you
Hmm.
like. And they had it in order for him to visit Leonardo da Vinci, had a tunnel built underneath the between the two chateaux, a tunnel that ran, so he didn't have to take his whole entourage. He could just little whip through and visit his engineer, and vice versa. And so, kind of like one of those what if stories. But so then I wanted this idea of this grotesque, because the story involves Da Vinci's grotesque creatures, and also
Hmm.
it's his mechanical man, which I don't know, people who know a little bit about Da Vinci, he invented these wonderful things, and this mechanical soldier of his actually works.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. There's a
Wow.
Da Vinci Museum is actually in the little Clos de Luce Museum now in Amboise in France. It's absolutely a must visit. It's got all the Archimedes screws and all his wonderful inventions, and this mechanical soldier, which actually exists and actually functions. So
He
I mean,
he could have
story
been.
fodder, right?
Yeah, I
Story
mean,
fodder.
he could have easily become a supervillain.
well, supervillain.
I
So,
mean, Da Vinci.
yeah, Da Vinci. Oh my God, yes, absolutely, absolutely, and that's the point. So then I said to things in the world said, well, who would you like to do the cover? And I said, oh, like I loved Greg's work. He's done about 5 covers for me, and. And so we went to Greg and said, "Here's the story. Can you do Da Vinci? I mean, no pressure, right? Can you do Da Vinci?" And Greg came up with this, which is just
Oh, it's,
it's wonderful. And and the publisher has done a hard copy version. We haven't sold very many because they're a little
mhm.
bit expensive by the time they're sent all around, but they're just beautiful with watermarked paper. And
Oh,
oh,
wow.
they're just all sepia in this old style. It's really lovely. And actually, I should show you, because right here I happen to have these on my desk. Greg actually sent me these lovely hand done
Oh,
drafts. I'm going to
whoa.
put them in frames, but I haven't quite found the frame I want. So yes, so these are the originals.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
They actually sent me these. We did decided not on this one. He felt a little static, but isn't
Mm,
he gorgeous? Isn't
it's
he lovely?
beautiful.
Yeah, so Greg sent me those. I think I have another one more, a free. Yeah, no, I have, those are them. So yeah, so well, he actually also sent me his original. You probably can't see this one very well, but
Yep.
this was the original sketch of Dawn of the Zombie Apocalypse, which is a children's story that I wrote that has come out from IFWG. So, yeah, yeah. So I'm very
Wow.
lucky. So I absolutely adore
It's,
this cover,
oh,
isn't
yeah, that's
it?
beautiful. That is a
Yeah.
beautiful cover. And
And yeah, and Jonathan Mabry wrote me this wonderful blurb. So yeah, no, it's so exciting.
you,
He is
you,
such a nice man.
you've definitely arrived.
Oh, thank you. That's nice, isn't it? I don't know that I have, and
Oh, come
yeah.
on. Come on. Don't be modest. You've arrived. 5-time Bram Stoker nominee. you know,
Yeah, that's a bit of a miracle, isn't it? I'm still pinching myself about that one. Yeah, I don't know. I feel I think partly my books are mostly sold overseas, and so they don't. And because it is so difficult to get print books in New Zealand, and
yeah.
the difficulty of it, I'm sure you understand. You probably haven't seen too many print copies of your own books in Mexico,
No.
um, and so it is really a difficult problem for us. And so I'm New Zealand's most awarded science fiction, fantasy, and horror writer, but I'm not particularly well known in my own neighborhood. So it's a tough one, isn't it?
Uh,
So
uh,
I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to feel um,
you feel like
like
you've
you've made it.
yeah.
You know.
No, I get that. I get that because I've some of the people I work with when they found out I was an author, they said to me, what's your we looked you up because I write under a pen name. They said we looked you up, we couldn't find you. I said no, this is the name, and they actually bought a copy of a short
Oh,
story
how lovely.
collection, and they said, can you sign it? I was like, so this is how it looks, in this is the real thing. Okay, this is surreal. Being asked to sign my own books, that's a surreal feeling. So,
Yeah, it is. It is. It's lovely feeling too, isn't it? When
oh
people,
yes,
will invest in you and buy some of your work, and it's that's a wonderful feeling.
oh definitely, definitely. Um, for me, it's more surreal because I'm very much that sort of guy. Very much I put it out, I get it out there. I'm like, okay, if it sells great, if it doesn't sell fine, I I'm very shy about talking about my own work in regards to promoting or anything like that. So when someone says I bought your book, I'm like, why? Which is not the right mentality.
Well, yeah, no, I don't. The problem is discoverability, isn't it?
Yeah,
And we're with a small press, and so a specialist small press, which is great because it means that those readers can find us. But generally, discoverability is the issue,
yeah.
and and the big presses are not taking a lot of work, and they're taking a certain sort of work, and and then there's that whole perception that what we write is kind of pulp, and so therefore it's not as good, which sorry, I don't agree.
Oh no, no, no,
um
definitely.
you know And the thing about awards is a strange one because it's really fickle, the award thing. You, not all of the award books are necessarily the best books.
Mm-hmm.
They're just what have resonated for people in a certain period of time, and also I think with the awards, it's a strange one because you're only as good as your last book. That's kind of how I feel, and also you kind of think I don't know. There's this thing. I have 12 Sir Julius Vogel Awards for science fiction and fantasy in New Zealand,
Whoa.
and but every time it's like, and I don't mean this in a very egotistical way, but it's like it's imposter syndrome. It's like there's a
Mhm.
mistake, and I need to do better because people are going to find out that actually I'm a fraud and it's not real, and every time it does inspire me to try harder and do more and develop myself more and challenge myself to write different works,
Mhm.
and so and that's kind of probably why you see I've written all over the place. I mean, I have a chick lit, and I've got children's literature, and I've got I write monster stories, and I don't know, my other Bram Stoker nominee is Black Cranes, which is sort of Asian horror
Mhm.
fiction by women writers of Asian descent, and so I'm sort of all over the place, and perhaps that's part of the problem for me of discoverability. People don't really know what I write because
Mm.
I write everywhere. So, although mostly New Zealandy stuff, so even my Asian fiction has a New Zealand feel to it, and but yeah, you know, that whole "Have you arrived yet?" and it's interesting. I asked this question on Facebook just a few days ago. Actually, is kind of what does literary success mean to
Mhm.
you? And I had, oh, I don't know, 70 responses from my colleagues, and it's different. It's shifting, or it shifts depending on where you are on the day, or where you are in your
Yep.
career, or some people just want to make a sale, and some people just want to get a good review, and some people just want to finish something.
Mhm.
It's your literary success just kind of moves. It's always moving,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you know now that you've written all these books, Richard, what does literary success mean to you? I'm on the call, darling. Good morning. um and it's Sunday morning here in New
Yep.
Zealand, so
It's okay.
um so it's quite an elusive thing, and so when you say, do you feel like you've succeeded? Well, yes, I'm very grateful for everything I've achieved, and the response to my books and my work that I get from readers. Do I think I've made it? I don't, not yet. And maybe that's because I'm always wanting to challenge myself
Yep.
to write the next best thing. People ask me, what's my best book? What's my favorite book? What's my best piece of work? And I often say it's the piece that I'm about to write. It's the one I haven't written yet,
Ooh, that's a
because
good
I'm
answer.
always, I always want to be better. Always want to extend myself and write something just that little bit more, that little bit better. If we're not if we're not moving, we're not challenging ourselves, then well, what's the point really? We're just writing the same thing.
That's actually a really good answer. That's a good way of looking at it. So
Do you not feel that way? Do you not feel like you hope that the next, I mean, you wrote this novella and you said this is rubbish. So clearly you're thinking, there's not even a kernel of an idea, what you need to start over and do better. And I think that is kind of the essence of a good writer, is always striving to be, to how can I say this better and touch people in different ways.
we'll see.
No, that didn't sound good, did it?
Really,
Oh.
but I I understood what you were saying. Um, for me, I have this thing of every book I write, it's stories I want to read. I'm writing for myself. I'm very selfish in that regards. So, for example, Valley of Becho or um, Kaiju World, which was another one put out by Severed. Those were ones I wrote. It's just, yeah, I want to read this. This is something I want to read, and if it if it gets an audience, great. And if it doesn't, okay, it's out in the world. I'm happy. you know, and if I touch someone, then, and not in a inappropriate way, then that's even better. And like back in 2019, I put out my only short story collection. I don't even think they're short stories. They're like 10,000 words. So I don't know what.
Novelettes,
Yeah, yeah. However you want to describe it, but I put it out, and you know, some once again, people I work with, these Mexicans who, they bought it, and one of them said to me, "Okay, one of your stories, Richard, it gave me nightmares for 2 days," and I just went, "All right, that's it. I can,
nice.
yeah, I'm done. That's it. If I don't publish anything else ever again, I'm happy with just hearing that." Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Well, reviews it like that just really make it worthwhile, don't they? They really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I first started, I'm actually relatively new to publishing. My first book came out 2018. But before that, I wrote movie
Wow,
scripts.
you've got huge backlist for someone who's only been writing for 3 years.
I'm very, very fast, and I have this thing when I hit upon an idea I really like, I've got to get it written. If I don't get it written, I get very, very frustrated. And according to everyone who knows me, when I'm not writing, I become a cranky asshole. So I've got to.
Well, I'm pretty much a cranky asshole all the time. So, people don't notice the difference.
Okay, so that's the secret then. Okay, that's the secret.
Yeah. And novels, it's novels for you. That's the place. That's your sweet spot. Or this, I mean, this is the first time you've done a collection of
yeah,
something together.
Yeah, and that was, as I said, that each of those, there's 4 stories in that collection, and it's my own like extreme cosmic horror universe I created, and each one's 10,000 words, and that was more because I writing a short story for me is very frustrating. Anything under about, if like under 5,000 words, I hate it because
It's very hard. It's very hard to write short fiction. It really is. You have
yeah,
to start late and finish early, and it has to be lean. And so, and there's a lot of good ideas go into a short story, and it's just, you could stretch them out and make them a novel. So yeah, it's a completely different discipline for sure.
yeah, and I have the problem of when I start writing, I'll do an outline and I'll start writing, and next thing I know, I've gone off with all these extra ideas, and it's growing from what I originally had. And short story, same thing. Okay, submission, you got to do, 3,000 words. Okay, I can do that. I did one that unfortunately was rejected, but I did do one. But while writing it, I realized, hang on, I've got all these extra ideas. I could turn it into maybe a 40,000 words novella instead.
Yeah.
And there was part of me that was like, okay, if they accept it, great. If they don't accept it, I can do it.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, but it is a completely different discipline for
Oh, yeah.
sure, and they do take a lot of energy. Short stories, don't they?
Oh,
As
yeah.
much as a novel. Although I'm a very slow writer, I'm lucky if I write 500 words a day.
Okay.
I think it's my inner editor because I do a lot of editing as well, and so my brain is always on edit mode, and how can I clean this up and take all of the rubbish out. And so actually making the word count is pretty hard for me. I write pretty lean in general, and so making that word count is really difficult.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially if you're doing an active submission. If you're just if you've pitched something and they've said, yeah, write it, then you've got that it can be as long as I want. But yeah, see, I know a lot of other authors who have that internal editor. I don't.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people, it's about process. So you are a plotter, and I'm a bit more of a pantser. So I tend to take, and that's I think why it takes so long, because you can write yourself into a little bit of a corner.
Yeah.
And when you've written a few, and every time you write a novel, you think, oh my God, I don't know how to write a novel, but you kind of do. And there's a sort of process that goes on in your head, and so for me, I tend to have a beginning and an end and a general idea, and then I kind of go that way, and then you get to the middle, and well, it's always that sort of fluffy middle bit where you think that the world is ending and oh, this is rubbish, and you just got to work through that until you get to the work through the chaff
Yep.
until you basically make it to that end point. So a lot of the time, what I've done is I've written the first scene and I've written the last scene, and then I write my way there.
Okay.
Um, but I think it is quicker to outline, and I have done that. Oh no, so I did do that with Into the Ashes, which is the last book in the Tame McKenna series, which is pretty much my last solo, which is some time now. It's the last solo novel. I do write this series, this Path of Ra series with
Hmm.
Dan Raybarts, and so we're both pantsers in this. I never know. We kind of have an overarching idea, and then we both write a different character in this book. So we're writing both characters, but we have more sort of autonomy for the development of one character each, the
Okay.
dual protagonist. Um,
And
yeah, and so I never know basically what Dan's going to write. So I'll write a chapter, and then he'll send me something, and I go, "Oh heck," and then I have to kind of, because my character is a scientific character who does the real world
mhm.
sort of solution to this crime noir series, and Dan, he writes the sort of dark and brooding sort of brother character, who kind of takes them off on car chases and explosions, and he throws these in, and my character's supposed to kind of work out the science behind some of the stuff. And yeah, good one. And my science background is kind of 30 years old. I haven't
Oh,
been a
but
scientist for that long, and so
you've got someone on call that you can have help you with the science
yes.
part.
Yes, number of times I've said to my husband now, how do I short this piece of equipment, or remind me how electricity works, or he's a physicist, so he's very handy in those things. I think in one of the books, in the first book, we had a cobalt source, which was was part of the solution to a locked room murder.
Mm,
So, and he gave me that little tip, so that was nice.
okay. And
Yeah.
so yeah, okay. I got two things.
We're
You said
sidetracked now.
no, 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 no. It's not a problem. No, it's just that you said a couple of things that I wanted to follow up on, and we didn't. So you said that you didn't feel like you were mature enough to write shorts to do your short story collection. Why?
I don't know. I think, yeah, that's interesting because I've had one of my mentees starting on a short story collection. I think, oh, to me, it's like you bring together. It's like a best of, isn't it? You
Hmm.
bring together something, and you maybe choose some stories that you've written, and then you've written as commission stories, or for submissions for other things, and you bring those together, and you write some new ones, and you kind of bring it together in a coherent way along a theme. And I didn't feel like I had got enough together to do that. And so I just didn't feel, yeah, like I was quite ready to do that. So like, this is the best of. It's like, when you have a band, and they've been
Uh,
singing for a while, and then they bring their best loved songs together. And so I didn't quite feel I was ready for that. But actually, it's been a wonderful experience, and several of my colleagues said, "No, you definitely need to do this," and it just gave me an opportunity to sort of showcase some of the other kinds of writing that I do. That is not necessarily all, it's all monstery stuff,
yeah.
but in different ways. And from flash all the way to sort of 14 or 15,000 words, I think is the longest story in there. Most of them around 8 or
Hmm.
9,000 words. And
Okay, so not
yes, yeah.
traditional short stories in length.
Yeah, well, sort of five, and
Yeah,
it's sort of a story is as long as it takes, right? So
yeah,
sometimes you have a bigger idea and it needs a little bit more. And to me, obviously there's a skill in writing 5,000 words. If the editor wants 5,000 words, you kind of got to get it in there. Women actually are better at this. Just
yeah.
want to say. So I have edited or curated a book called Hellhole,
Hmm.
an anthology of Subterranean Terror, and it had Jonathan Maberry and Sean Ellis and Michael
Yeah.
McBride and a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
and Rena Mason. She won a Bram Stoker for her story in that collection.
Wow.
Jessica McHugh, just some of my favorite writers, just some of my favorite high octane writers, and actually I called for 8,000 words or thereabouts, and all of the women wrote up to 8,000 words. So half women and half men in that collection, and all the women write up to 8,000 words. 7.5,
Yep.
pretty much to the T. And then all of the men, like, oh. Well, one of them were a bit shorter, but all the rest of them were sort of it was over. Oh, look, I'm sorry, I'm over the word count. Is this going to be okay? And Jonathan Maberry, I mean, he's just such a wonderful. He just got carried away with his story,
Yep.
and he said, look, I've done this. It's a Joe Ledger. It's a bit longer than than you see. And I thought, oh, give it. I'll have that. Thanks very much, Jonathan. But generally, a story takes the time it takes, and it takes it fills the space it needs to fill. So the word count, if it needs more word count, then you make it more word count. But and it just obviously Jonathan had really had fun with it, and he liked the idea, and he back to being back in that Joe Ledger world, which is just so fun.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone loves Joe Ledger, and so and I was never going to say no to a longer story by Jonathan Maberry, but they do. They take the word count that they need to tell the story.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. So yeah, but I do say that women tend to sort of follow the rules a little bit more, and if the story didn't quite fit, they probably would have gone and written me another one.
Yeah.
Just to make it fit my guidelines.
No, that makes sense. Because whenever I know that you've got another. Okay, I'm gonna mangle the pronunciation of the character's name. It's Tane McKenna.
Yeah, it's Tane. Yep.
Yep.
Tane McKenna. It's
Okay.
not a Maori name. It's
No,
Tane McKenna.
It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
living in Mexico for almost 5 years, you forget how to pronounce certain regular-ish names in English.
He was Tane was the name of one of our All Black captains. There we go.
Okay, so
And so I
that's
just
why.
used that name.
Okay, that's why I'm good, since it's All Blacks and with Australia. Yeah, no, okay, that explains why I'm not going to pronounce it properly.
But also I can understand that because it is sometimes written Tane, Tane, and in New Zealand that's Tane, the god of the forest. So there was kind of nice parallel there. Yeah.
No, it's a good name. That's the thing. And I know that I think you wrote another short story for the Screaming Banshee Press Contact collection. So when you I've got a story in that too, and the problem I had with that one, Black Ice, was I wrote it and it turned to 15,000 words. So then I had to go, no, I'm not going to submit that because I know Chris will say no. I had to cut it so much.
Really? And
Yeah.
I don't think he would have said no.
It was one of those things
What was it supposed to be? Because I think mine was 9.
Yeah, it was 10. His
okay.
His
right,
cap was
okay.
10,000, and I have that mentality. If they say it's this, I'm going to give them as close to that as I can get. If I can get it right on the button, I will.
Yeah.
I was having so much fun with that story. They turned into about 15,000 words. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure if it was like maybe 11 or 12, he would say yes, but not 15. not.
Always ask. Always ask.
Yeah.
Except for clearly you got it trimmed down and tight. So that's always good too.
Well, that's the thing.
To have it. Yeah.
Because like with me, when I do my editing, I always go, okay, what's the boring parts? What's the part I'm going to skip over? If I'm reading my draft and I start
that's a really good rule of thumb. Yeah,
Yep.
Leave out the boring bits. Absolutely. That's exactly what I tell my mentees. If you're writing, just leave out the boring bits that people don't want to read because we don't want to read them. So if it's boring to write, it's boring to read. Yeah, totally.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so you enjoy being a mentor to up and coming authors?
Yeah, I do. It's becoming problematic because I have so many, and so many people approach me, and I'm also one of these people who can't say no.
Mhm.
So, there's that whole guest culture and ask culture. Well, I'm a guest culture person, and so I don't ask you unless I hope give you a way out and feel you're not overburdened. Or and I also can't say no when people ask me, so it's really hard. So I end up with lots of, doing lots of free work, and it is becoming problematic because it
Mm.
does get in the way, but I do love it. I love it, and I enjoy seeing my mentees succeed. It's hugely empowering to say I had a hand in that, and I helped, and I mean, also people of course are grateful, and not, you don't do it for them to be grateful, but they're always, it's lovely to think that you've inspired them
Mm.
to carry on with their story and persevere and really tighten it up and make it something special. Just recently, one of my mentees sent me a note, or a Canadian mentee, and said, "Oh, I'm in this anthology. I've had my story picked up, that we worked on together, which is lovely, and I'm also in that anthology." So that's kind of a big, well, it hasn't been announced yet. So, but there's a really big plus. I'm pretty excited about that. And when they come back to you with their stories about how they've done well, it's very rewarding and also I learn a lot. I do learn a lot
Really?
about, yeah, because you're always, like I say, always striving to improve your own writing. And so when you see something and you say, "Oh, this doesn't work, and why doesn't that work?" and you're trying to help your mentee over this hurdle of why this doesn't quite resonate, and what needs to be done. And of course you're learning from that yourself, so it's always valuable.
Okay, cool. I've never been a mentor, and I've never had a mentor, so it was just one of those things that I was curious about.
Oh, it's definitely, look, and there's always more mentees than there are mentors, and so, people should put their hands up. You don't have to be a New York Times best-selling author. I'm not, in order to offer help. And people are at different stages of their writing career. They might not have ever written a novel, and so that's quite a daunting task. And so they might have written half of a novel or the draft of a novel, and they need help revising it and
Yeah,
getting it into a better shape, or tightening up their subplot or whatever. Or they've written one and they're trying to write a sequel and they don't know how to pull a story arc through, those sorts of things. And so, you might have those skills, and you might not be that person with all of the skills, but you can help move their story along and help them make progress. So I think that those are, um, I think people underestimate what they know,
oh yeah.
you know and so once you get in together and you're working as a little bit of a team, what can we do here, how's this going to work, is this what your intent was? When you ask all those questions and you tease it out, then you get, you can really come up with some solutions that they might not have seen for themselves. And you don't have to be the best, you just have to have some skills that you can offer. So, and I think the thing about mentoring and is that as a mentee,
Mm.
it's just amazing to have someone else invested in your work and wanting to see you succeed who isn't your mother. You know, it's just,
Well,
it's huge. It's huge.
funny enough, in my family, my mum is proud of the book stuff. My dad is the one who's more supportive and more like pushing. He's actually given me title ideas for books. So it's usually they say, "Oh yeah, it's your mum's your biggest fan." That's my dad, which is
Well, yeah. I think my dad would have been my biggest fan. He was, I mean, no, that's not fair because my mum is fantastic. I lost my dad last year in
oh,
lockdown,
so sorry to
and
hear that.
yeah, no, it's okay. It was a good death, but he was the person who kind of instilled the whole idea of story in me. He used to tell me stories, bedtime stories that he'd made up himself.
Hmm.
And I often speak about this. He used to tell the story of Professor Morgan. His name was Morgan. Professor Morgan and his Zizburp, which was a thing that was a steampunk machine that he constructed out of bits of pipe and bicycle tires and stuff in the garage. And he was an inventor, and he would go around the world in this Zizburp machine that went Zizburp, 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 obviously. And he would solve environmental problems using his machine, which could go under the water in the sky, fantastical sort of stuff. And I love those stories that Dad used to tell us. And the other one was about Horace and Aristotle, two little frogs. who were a bit stupid, that lived at the bottom of our garden, and the creek at the bottom of our garden. I don't suppose most people know what that means. A little stream, and yeah, really great. And when we would go on road trips, my family lived in the North Island, and in Hamilton, Taupo, and the rest of the family lived in Wellington. So we used to
Okay.
drive down periodically, and 6 hours is a long way when you're a kid. And so we'd be in the back of the car, and he would tell these shaggy dog stories, and he would use the landscape as part of the story. And then it got to the point where, as kids, we would say, "Oh, but Dad, look, there's this problem." And so that's all, that's kind of, oh, here's your character going along, going along, going along. It often would be my cousin, actually. Would be he'd make the story about someone who was chasing the car, and there would be problems, like, oh no, there's a load of washing and they're going to have to run through the washing line. And then there's a bunch of cow poos, or, stuff. And we would throw these challenges in. And so that's kind of storytelling, isn't it? I mean, that's
Yeah.
just how to make a story. Is, here's your character, and here's what they want to catch the car, and here is the problem, and here is the problem, and here is the problem, and how are they going to overcome it. And so, Dad was that person. He sort of instilled this love of writing and reading and story in me. And actually, when I wrote my first book, or when my first book was published, it was a children's story called Battle of the Birds, time travel story. Um, and Dad already had dementia, and so he came to the book launch. But I don't know, like I don't know how much he remembered. I just know he was proud of me. So yeah, I think that if Dad knew, kind of, I mean, I do. I used to tell him this, every little milestone. I've
Mhm.
won this award, Dad. He'd be super proud. He wouldn't remember it in the next moment, but I know he was proud. So yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? How but having that support from family and their enthusiasm about your work is huge. And my husband doesn't read, the physicist. He doesn't read books. Get off the windowsill, dog. Hop off. Um, and he doesn't read, but he reads my stuff, and he's a huge supporter. And I think having those people behind you, like a mentor,
Yep.
if someone else loves your work and is just invested in seeing you succeed, then that's huge, isn't it? It's
Oh
really
yeah.
it's really huge. And for speculative writers like ourselves, there isn't a lot of support from funding bodies
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. There's nothing. And so finding those people in your corner is really huge.
Yeah. Having what was it that tribe? That's what people call it. That's the buzzword. Um, and I mean, I'm from what you've said, you've got your tribe with just not only with your family, but also other authors. um, and you said you're a fan of Greg Beck, and then you and him are now friends.
Yeah.
Going from that sort of thing of being a fan to being a friend, was that a surreal experience? Was that
Oh my
strange?
gosh. It's the strangest thing. And I do recommend, this kind of creating this tribe around yourself and community. And because it really does make a difference. People who get you, who understand, who love the same sort of things as we do. I remember when I first went to a StokerCon event. Now, anyone who's interested in dark fiction should attend one of those. And this year's virtual, so $75 to attend a virtual, 4-day event with the Final Frame film event, and you can do readings and panels. And there's a horror university courses where you can learn about writing um, and also about the theme of horror,
Mhm.
any sort of topics on horror. And just I went to one of those the first time with my husband. And we were in Las Vegas for this particular one, which was run by Irina Mason that particular year, which did a great job. I think she doesn't remember any of it. I met her there, and she doesn't recall meeting me there. So that's a funny story. But I went there, and I knew nobody. And anyway, someone put up a call on the page on the event page. Look, I'm here early because I was there a couple of days early. And does anyone want to meet for a coffee? And so I met with Hilary Walk Dodge, who was the scholarship winner that year. Um, Wonderful librarian and a community advocate, and also a very good writer. And I also met with Monica Kubler, who is the editor of Rue Morgue.
Oh
And of
wow.
course, so yeah, exactly. So the three of us went for I didn't know anybody. I didn't know them, and we went for lunch, had a lovely afternoon, and of course, they knew everybody. They knew everybody. So when we get into the meet and greet, and they're going, "Oh, have you met this person? And have you met this person?" I was just the little Kiwi, that's that. And of course, they remembered me because the squeaky accent. I mean, it's not, it's just I was the only Kiwi in the room with the squeaky
Yep.
accent, so of course they remembered me. But it was just wonderful. I mean, I remember getting introduced to Jonathan Mabry, and he said, "Oh yes, I know you. Yeah, I know you. You're part of this cohesion group of writers." And I met Western Oaks, and just lovely people who just sort of said, "Hey, I know, I've heard of you." And so when you're rubbing shoulders with writers that you're just
Yep.
say your idols, that's just huge. It's just huge. Yeah, I've sat at a panel with Greg Beck, and just lovely man, and just so kind. And it is, there's this, Jonathan says this thing, Richard, and he said he has a talk that he gives called Act Like a Writer. And he says he says, they're not your competition. Other writers are your community. And readers I can't write enough for readers to read. If you've when they finished Into the Mist, well, of course they're going to read Valley of the Beechu, because that's a great, the story that's going to appeal to them.
Yep.
So, and I can't write that many books in a year for them to read one a week, which is what people can easily read a book a week. Well, especially when they're commuting, not so
Yep.
much when well, yes, maybe if they're sitting at home in their pajamas. Um, and he says, why should they not be reading you if they're not reading me? Mind you, that particular, Jonathan Mabry can, while we've been doing this talk, he's probably written a novel, because that's how fast he is.
Oh,
But
probably.
yeah, and he's such, and there is this kind of it's a cross fertilization. You meet someone and you enjoy their work, and you're a fan of their work,
Yep.
and that shows. If you're enthusiastic about their work, and so you'll support them, and they'll support you, and the readers, they're the same readers, right? They're often the same people who like Jonathan's work might like mine, and vice versa. So um and it opens up so many opportunities. He's been fabulous to me. Obviously he's given me this wonderful, wonderful blurb for Grotesque, which I'm sure makes a difference,
Yep. That is.
and yeah, and also, got me on Weird Tales, invited me to write a story for Weird Tales, and I'm the first New Zealander to ever appear in that magazine. That's just massive. That's
That's
just,
a feather in the cap.
it was huge, but it's all his doing, it's like, it was all his doing. He said, we need you, and would you like to write something? And and I said, would you like something very New Zealand? And he said, oh yes, please. And so there we go. Obviously I had to write something that appealed and was weird,
Yeah.
and that was sort of a bit stressful, because were you going to make the grade when you think of all of the writers that have written for, Poe, and all of those big writers
Yeah.
that have, Lovecraft, and all of those that have written for Weird Tales, and you think Robert Bloch, and oh my goodness, all, it's just, how do you that's a huge legacy. So it was pretty daunting. But again, I would not have had that opportunity if I hadn't met him. And so creating community around you as a writer is vital, because also our readers are reading those same things. They like the
Yeah.
same things. So
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So you have that. You very much have that mentality of pay it forward.
Yeah, and community building, build a community. I feel strongly about this for New Zealand because we're a small group of people, and you probably know this a bit about Australian fiction. We've got so much talent,
Oh yeah.
and our stories are different. They're not the same as everybody else's. They have this different element to them, and we need to get those out there. And New Zealand, I feel. Um, we're so small, and we have a really good core of really great writers, but getting that discoverability of New Zealand fiction,
Yeah.
New Zealand art fiction out there is going to need critical mass, and if they're reading me, then they should also be reading my colleague Dan Raybarts, and they should be reading Paul Mannering. If
Hmm.
they like my stuff, then they'll probably like their stuff, and then if they like their stuff, there'll be other things that resemble their work that they might also like. So, it is a case of building readership, but also building our community, because those voices are important and need to be heard.
Oh, definitely. And is the problem? Do you think the problem is okay? You say discoverability, but trying to build that community, because there are always those people who, unfortunately, are going to be dickheads.
Yeah, yeah, that is kind of Jonathan's rule of being a writer. Is there are 10 rules, he says, and the first one is don't be a dick, and the second one is don't be a dick, and the third one is don't be a dick. So you're probably, you probably picking the theme, and I think it's actually a very good it's a very good rule to live by,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. And I think the New Zealand is small, so if you kind of annoy someone, then those things can have ripples. And my kind of mantra is a little bit try and be kind,
Hmm.
um, because it's a hard business. Most of us aren't making a living. I'm a full-time writer, and I still need support. My work doesn't sell enough to. I mean, I do okay, but
Yeah.
I'm not selling enough, to make. I'm not. You know,
You don't have a
Basically, I
yacht.
need to. No, I don't have a yacht, and not yet. And so I do need support. My husband supports my work because it's not, it's a tough business, and so yeah, 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 that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I do think community is important, but it's a very small community in New Zealand. So if
Yeah.
you do something dicky, then people are gonna know, I guess. I think there's a little bit of a prob a sort of unspoken rule not to diss publishers, and that's a bit of a problem, because some there are some publishers who are not very good,
Mm.
who do not treat their writers well, and you don't learn about it often until
It's
and it's very quiet, and so that's a little bit tricky, because the publishing business is really tricky, and so that's the thing. We do need to be kind, but we also need to be honest, and I
yeah.
think that's a tricky one. So navigating that field is not easy, and new writers need a lot of support. And is this contract a fair one? And I'm just looking at New Zealand at the moment, is looking at some legislation around copyright, and if it's in the public good, then that material should be free, and that concerns
Ah.
me a great deal.
Yeah.
And it's coming from Google and Amazon and distributors like that who want access to content, of course. And of course, Australia, you may be aware of, has gone through this with a news issue.
Yeah.
um, and it's a real worry for us here in New Zealand, for the writers, because if the government or whoever it is decides that my work is in the public good because it covers Maori mythology and it's set in New Zealand national parks, and the conservation department might be interested in them, then that's effectively my work stolen. And
Yeah.
so I'm quite concerned about that. So this is why community is so important, because we can all have come together and have a collective voice and a discussion about these sorts of political things, and it's to do with technology and progress, right? the internet didn't exist, when the models for contracts and literary
Uh-huh.
contracts were sort of developed. There was no such thing as these platforms where you could sort of deliver content, willy-nilly. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, hearing about that with New Zealand, with if it's for the public good, it's going to be free for everyone. Yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong on so many
yeah, and
levels.
it is, and people, it exists now. For example, if you write something and the school system uses it for a school exam, then that is free, and they don't tell you, they just use it. Then you don't get an honorarium. You don't they just use it in an
Jeez.
exam. And so I've had colleagues who've had poems and things just taken and used now, because that's in the public good and for educational purposes, which I
Mm,
I understand that. But also I think that there's a an area, there's a place where that could be, but if it's bigger and it becomes all public good, then that becomes exploitation and theft, really
yeah.
theft,
Oh yeah.
of people's intellectual property and their hard work. It's hard work writing a novel.
Yep.
It's hard work and it takes a lot of time. So
Oh yeah.
um,
I mean, it falls under. It's like a governmental. Oh, okay. Let me get this in order before I say it. Otherwise, I'll be all over the place. It's that mentality of happy to pay $5 or however much for a coffee, but I don't want to pay $1 for a book. Is that
yeah.
but from a government?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a paper at the moment, and they're looking into it, and so we're sort of obviously trying to, add our voices to the conversation, writers here in New Zealand. It
Hmm.
also applies to software engineers, which is interesting.
Really?
So yeah, because software, obviously, a lot of software engineers will put their app or whatever up on the platform and
Yep.
then sell the add-on or whatever. So certain things can be offered for free, which is, I mean, and we do it with books sometimes.
Uh-huh.
You give a free book, and then you hope that people will read the other books in the series. So that sometimes happens in the book
Oh yeah.
industry, but that's different when you choose to do that as opposed
Yeah.
to when it's just
It's
taken.
yeah,
So
that's it. It's the choice. I mean, I suppose if you were given a choice, if they said, okay, you have a choice, you can refuse or you can let some of your work be used in the public domain, basically.
I don't know how they're going to define what the public good is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And too bad if that's your work. And I
Yeah.
don't know. And it's already difficult enough to have a sustainable career as a writer. You need to be fairly diverse, and there's just so much work to be done in the background, keeping up a newsletter and doing this sort
Yeah.
of thing where we're sort of being present. And while I enjoy it, it's still work. So, it is very difficult to make a living as a writer, and it's a real problem. And yeah, and it is, especially if you want to write quality books,
Yeah.
that people enjoy. And it is a very tough one. And of course, we're heading into politics. On the other hand, right now, with the sort of real unrest around Asian hate crime, I think that this Black Cranes book has resonated for people because of that. So there's
Yeah.
kind of, you know, politics. Sometimes it works for us and sometimes it doesn't.
Well,
But I have been very, what's the word? I've been inspired, and I'm gratified a little bit that people have felt that these stories have resonated and that they've spoken to them, especially in this last year or so when there has been so much anti-Asian rhetoric,
yeah.
and unrest. And I think if this helps in a little bit in some ways for people to understand, then that's an achievement, and that makes me feel good too. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's Black Cranes is on my, just like you, my to be read
yes,
list is
yes, we
massive.
can't
And
read everything that comes out. We do our best, but
well,
yes.
I mean, I honestly, I could probably get through my list. I could probably get through it in like maybe a year if I didn't write anything. That's the problem. I could get through everything I wanted to read, but I wouldn't write a word. That's the problem. But with Black Cranes, how did that come about?
Ah, well, that I was at GenreCon in Brisbane. I'd been invited to come across and do a talk, so I came across and a couple of panels, and I, being a conscientious little Asian girl, I arrived early for the panel,
Hmm.
and and I met Genevieve Flynn, who I knew of but had never sort of actually met, and she had arrived early for the panel because she's also a conscientious little Asian girl, and so we got chatting. Isn't this just typical? We're here early because we didn't want to be late, and so we talked about those things, and we sort of started saying, well, where is the fiction written by Asian horror writers, and especially where are the women?
Hmm.
And then we started talking about who we knew and whose writing we liked, and then we thought, oh well, why don't we do it? And so I went home, had a talk to my sponsor, and pitched it to Omnium Gatherum, who very progressive little specialty press, and so yeah, and that's how that came about, and so we pitched it to some of our favorite Asian horror writers, and they were excited about it. So, and actually, funnily enough, talking about word count, Christina Singh, who I don't know if you know her, she's a Bram Stoker award-winning poet, fabulous writer. She wrote the longest story she'd ever written. I think
Really?
it was 12 or 13,000 words for us, and all of our stories were in the 5,000 word range. So, and we had some in the 2,000 or
Yep.
1,500. We thought, oh my goodness, this is going to stand out. It was beautiful. It's a beautiful story, fabulous story, but it was going to stand out like a sore thumb in this collection and so we said to her, look, Christina, can we cut it down? And it was huge for her because she'd never written anything this big, and she was very proud, and rightly so.
Mm.
And we said, how do you feel if we just chop it down? And we didn't want to chop out a big section of it. We said, what if we just graze off a word here and a
Hmm.
sentence here? And that was just, it took, it was a big effort because we didn't want to lose the essence of the story, because it's actually a sort of gritty zombie story, kind of, and with a fairy tale ending. So
Oh,
fairy
cool.
tale, it was how do you? It's like we're a little bit like the start of one of our Severed Press titles.
Yep.
High action, octane sort of story, and then we have this kind of fairy tale element to it. So how do you do that? I mean, that's pretty hard. So we wanted to retain those elements, but we didn't want this. We needed for, well, also for Christina's sake, so her story didn't seem wrong in this collection. And every one of the stories in this book has been cited as somebody's favorite. So I think we kind of nailed it in that
Yeah.
sense. We've got them all in a sort of a nice sort of mix of slightly shorter, slightly longer, but in that same ballpark. And so she was very kind to let us kind of butcher her story. And I think in the end, it still holds all that flavor. But yeah, that whole idea of getting the story word count right, and the fit right for anthology is
Oh,
important.
yeah. And I mean, you're putting out more anthologies. You're doing a lot more shorter works. Are you ever going to go back to, like, okay, you've got the Book of Ra stuff with Dan Rabbits, you've got all these anthologies coming out, and you're providing more and more short stories. Are you ever going to go back to writing like a single author novel?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And at this point, this probably not this year. So this year, I'm working on a couple of little chapbooks, just because to help out my mentees.
Hmm.
So I'm working with Angela Eureka Smith on those, just to give some help, and because I keep saying the same things over and over again. And so I sort of want to set somewhere where I can send my mentees so they can get some help. And then we're talking about a spin-off for Black Cranes. I mean, a lot of people have asked me to do another one, and much as I'd like to, I kind of I want that. I need it funded, because
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, just funding it myself is pretty hard work. So if that were to happen, then I'd like that funded. So, but we are talking about a spin-off, which is kind of looking at Asian monsters, and people's responses to those. So particularly Asian writers' responses. So that's something I'm working on. But also this year, as a spin-off to Black Cranes, I'm putting out I'm writing a poetry collection, and it's kind of poetry and it's kind of not. So it's a sort of prose poem, short story collection based on the fox spirit mythology. So that's kind of really different for me. And I actually got a residency for that. So
Really?
I know it's like, yeah, it was my 43rd funding application, and it's the first time I've ever had any support. So it was a very, very big deal.
Wow.
So that's the second half of this year. I'll be writing that collection. I have a residency in Auckland, so very exciting. So that'll be that work, and I've got about I think I have about 10 or 15 short stories coming. That have been commissioned and that are sort of coming through working their way. And COVID sort of pushed a lot of things down the line. So quite a lot of things there, but also very exciting. And it's not announced yet, but I'm going to announce it here on your show. Is that I have a 3 book deal that I've just signed with Silver Shamrock Publishing. For short story collections. So the first one of those won't come out until 2022, because we're in 21 now, so the end of that year.
Wow.
So that's the next thing. So kind of my focus has sort of moved a little bit for this year. So when my next when will my next novel be? I'm not quite sure. We have another little Tane McKenna sort of brewing. I love that character, so I'm not quite ready to let him go. So I'll
Mm.
see about that. And I suspect that might just be a novella, but we'll see. And then I also have a couple of other ideas, just kind of sitting around there. And I also pitched another nonfiction book to a publisher who's accepted that, but COVID has kind of pushed it down the road. So we'll see where that's going to go. So lots of sort of
Wow.
projects. So
Yeah.
yeah. And also every year I do the Young New Zealand Writers, which is an organisation I founded with a colleague of mine, and we do short story competitions for New Zealand secondary and intermediate school students. So we've now published 19 books of children's work,
Wow.
including 2 novels. Yeah. And
That's
so I
really
mentor
impressive.
those, yeah, so I mentor those students, and that's huge. So every year we sometimes get as many as 1,000 entries, and we give every student individual feedback. So that
Wow.
actually takes me about 1,000 hours. Actually, it takes hundreds of hours every
Yeah.
year of free work. So I'm kind of needing to step back a little from those things, because I'm a little bit worn thin, as you can imagine. It
Oh
is
yeah.
problematic because, like I say, I can't say no to these things. So I need to sort of, step back a little bit. So in order to get some of my own work out, and like I say, very slow writer, 500 words a day is kind of my limit. So,
Nothing wrong with
it's
that.
gonna take me a wee while to get through all of this stuff
Just a
that I.
smidge. And okay, so right now you're writing all these short stories. Is that because you enjoy the format more, or is it just the way it's turned out?
Yeah, I love short stories. They're hugely challenging area, and it is as much. Honestly, it can take me several weeks to write a short story. It takes me time to think up the idea that's going to hold water. There's
Hmm.
actually going to be a solid piece of writing. um, and so they take me a lot of time, and then of course they have to be beta read and all the rest, and sensitivity tested, and so they do take me a lot of time. And but I've had a lot of commissions, so I have nothing written. So I have no backlog. I have no back catalog of
Yep.
stories that I can just hand out when someone says, have you got something? I don't have anything, so I have to write them. So
Okay.
so that's kind of where I'm at. So at the moment, I've got two. I've got 5 short story commissions that I need to finish. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So I actually don't have anything on spec, because I've got all these commissions that I need to, and there's some really cool ideas. So I can't tell. I can't. They're not announced yet, so
No,
I
it's
can't
like,
tell you.
don't worry,
But
don't worry.
but
Oh,
there's some really cool concepts. So I think and if they excite me, then of course I want to. But also I'm scared to say no to publishers and editors who ask me, because I hate for them to not ask me the next time, and
Yeah.
you're I still don't think I'm there yet. So does that make sense? Although this last year, getting on Weird Tales was amazing, and I got in a book with Stephen King, and that was amazing, and I'm in a book with Neil Gaiman, and that's amazing. So
Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of authors who can say, yeah, I'm in two different collections with one with Stephen King, one with Neil Gaiman. I mean, those are like for speculative fictions.
yeah,
Those are the
I
two
know.
big ones.
Yeah,
So
well, absolutely, and a number of, yeah, and some fabulous women writers as well. I'm very, very lucky. So, I just want to just keep at it, and
yeah.
and I think for that, I'm just going to need to whittle away a little bit at my voluntary hours, because they're getting out of hand. My husband's going, "What are you doing up at 3 a.m. in the morning working on some mentees work?" And I'm going, "Well, they need help, and he's going, "Come on, this is crazy stuff." you know I can't help myself, so I do need to step back a little bit from the volunteer work, although I do get so much out of it. So it's a really tough call. It's a balance, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't have that sort of happy problem of, you know,
There's no
focusing.
reason why you couldn't have a happy problem of lots of mentees. You just need
Well,
to step forward, Richard.
well, it's more a case for me. My happy problem is at the moment. I'm looking at my board. I've got 12 novels I want to write, like novellas or
Wow.
novels, and it's that sort of thing of okay, none of them are outlined. One of them is already promised to Severed Press. It's that sort of thing
That might
of
be your priority, that one.
well, because here's the thing, I've got another one that I'm going to send to another publisher, DNT Publishing, which they've asked for May, and that one is like, yeah, that's the actual priority to outline and get written. Well, it's kind of outlined. It's the expansion on novella, but the one for Severed, that's like, okay, yeah. The moment I finish this other one, that's the goal. But then I've got all these other ones. It's like, yeah, and they're all 12 of these stories are like clamoring for write me
I
first,
know,
write me,
that's a good problem. That's a
yeah,
really good problem to have. And yeah, and that's the thing. You just, if it's got to resonate for you, it's got to speak to you. And if that's where the energy is, then that's where you got to go. I think so.
exactly, yeah, exactly. And I mean, you earlier you asked about if it's novels for me. It's novels and novellas. That's it. Anything like unless it's like a anthology where I'm like, oh, I'm really excited to write a short story for that. Yeah. If not, it's going to be a lot longer. Like for me, between 20 to maybe 20,000 to 80,000 words. That's my golden spot for writing.
Right. So two novels this year, is that the plan? Two novels is that a kind of feasible workload for you?
I could if I'm not working the day job, and when I go back to Australia, I won't be. I can probably get 3 written a year. If I'm not if I'm if I go full time with the writing, I could get 3 novels done. Um, which that's easy. It's just more about you know fo- focusing on what I'm going to write next because my like I'm pretty sure you have the same problem. It's not a lack of ideas; it's a lack of time.
No, and for me, it's a lack of ideas.
Really?
Yeah, I really struggle with that whole plotting thing.
See,
No, I think it's yeah, no, it is difficult prioritizing, and I'm a bit of a chipmunk, and so how chipmunks kind of pick up an acorn and they hold it in their cheeks, and then they run along, and then they see another chipmunk, they see another acorn, and they pick it up and drop the first one. That's me, all the time, and I need to focus more on that one nut and finish and getting it up in the storage, poking it in the storage hole in
uh-huh.
the tree before I go down chasing some other nut. And I think that is, that's my problem. And I think and that seems to be a little bit your situation here with these novels, because you've got these fantastic ideas that you want to pursue and only so much time. So you need to
Yeah.
focus on, yeah. And actually, some writers can do that. They can have one project in the morning, in the afternoon, they shift to another kind of
Aren't.
mindset. And I admire those people. Wow,
Yeah. Oh, I'm jealous of those people because I've tried doing that. Working on one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and next thing I know, they've just become one mess of a gigantic novel that will never make any sense because it's two separate ideas. So I've got to get one done
Got to
at a time.
divorce the two. And yeah, so obviously this May one is the next focus. And
Yep,
three
that's the
months is
project.
feasible for you. See, that's the fastest I've ever written a novel.
Oh yeah, well,
um yeah.
the fastest I've written a novel, like a proper novel, which it was my first for Severed. That was a zombie apocalypse story, 60,000 words. I wrote that in a month.
Wow. Wow. See, into the mist, because I didn't know where it was going, took me 4 years.
Wow.
3 years or 4 years, I think. I don't know. I came out in 2016. Maybe, yeah, I think I was 2013. It took me several years anyway, 2 or 3 years. I was working on other bits and pieces at the time, but and then Into the Ashes, when I kind of knew what it was going to be, and I actually plotted that one, sort of, like, a little outline
Yeah.
page. And that then I had a general idea of where that was going, so that was good. And when my beta readers sent it back, I actually added a chapter. So yeah, no, that was, and they all turned out to be exactly 82,000 words or
Wow.
thereabouts. Yeah, yeah. So
That's
that just kind of is the sweet spot for those for me. But yeah, so interestingly, those processes were different, because by that point also I had kind of knew my characters and
yeah.
how they might behave, and that kind of thing. So that does make a difference to sort of how you develop. Of course, I think with Into the Mist, I was trying to do something different that hadn't been done before. And that's not to say that there'd never been a monster story, or there'd never been a kind of Jurassic Park kind of story,
Uh-huh.
but they had never been done, in New Zealand, with New Zealand mythology, with New Zealand soldiers,
Yep.
and the kinds of things that are true to this context. So I was kind of exploring a lot, and then I had to meet Rock Chesterman, who is, my New Zealand's Defence Force advisor, and he's given me so much information. And I actually got to go down to Trentham and stand in their, firearms cage, and yeah, it was really exciting. And
Oh,
he's
that's cool.
been super helpful. So I wanted it to be authentic as well, and I didn't know anything about anything. So, there's an element of research, of course, that needs to be done when you're doing something
Yep,
different. So,
of
um,
course.
yeah.
And okay, so what's your favorite part of the I'm going to say the job, coming up with the idea, the brainstorming, the actual writing or editing? Which is your favorite part of the whole process?
Oh, look, the problem is I'm probably a better editor than I am a writer. And which is horrible, because I don't want to be an editor. I want to be a writer. But editing has helped me understand the craft so
Hmm.
well. The ins and outs, the how do you get this suspense? How do you transition this chapter?
Yeah.
That I've learned so much through editing, and critiquing other people's work and being a mentor, that do I love it? Yes. But actually, the best part is when you've finished writing something and you read it back and it resonates for you, and then you get some other person read it and go,
Yep.
oh wow, this is fantastic, I really enjoyed this, or this spoke to me. Or so I don't know, what's the best part of the job? Having finished, maybe. Getting it out there. Maybe
Uh-huh.
not even the I love the writing, and that moment of, but that's a struggle. Even that's a struggle, isn't it? Every word is a struggle. So the whole business is hard, it's
See,
hard.
it's funny. It's funny. Honestly, for me, I don't. For me, my favorite part is the creation. Is the actual writing part, the creating. You know, I hate editing. I suck at editing.
Yeah, and I don't love the editing, but I love where it's taken me and what it's done for me, and my writing. So that's, I guess, and of course that's why I write so slowly, because I can't turn that in an
Yeah.
editor off. So actually, when I finish something, it doesn't usually need much in the way of changes.
Okay.
So often they'll come in and say, you need to strengthen this teeny little bit of this, maybe a sentence here, or maybe take this out and put it over here. Very rarely does an editor come back, or my beta readers come back and say to me, this is all needs changing. I almost never get that. And
Wow.
I think that's because I've got my inner editor on, and I'm working through those things as I go. And maybe, I don't know.
Well, I mean, we're all different. When it comes to writing, we're all different. We all have our own processes, and nothing's right and nothing's wrong. There's no
No,
correct way of doing it. It's whatever works
no.
for you. And I mean, anytime anyone talks about an inner editor, part of me, I kind of get a little jealous because I've never had one. It just, when
You
I'm,
can pay someone to do that.
yeah, I've heard about that. But remember,
um, you must have an inner editor, because when you said to me about your novella being crap, you said, it was rubbish. You already knew that it wasn't speaking to you, that there are things about it that weren't. I mean, I'm sure it all wasn't crap. I'm sure there were some passages there, and there were probably sections that were perfectly fine, but they didn't fit. They weren't coherent. That there was just it was more word spew and getting the ideas
yeah.
down, and now you can take those ideas and write it. So your inner editor is already on. You are using it. You're just not you're not saying it in a formal way, but it is working, because you clearly
Well,
knew it wasn't there yet.
okay. See, when you say it like that, it sounds really great and intellectual. The way I think of it, it was I inherently knew it was shit. It was one of those, just
Yeah, but isn't that the thing though? If you say you're a plotter or a pantser, I mean, if you're a pantser, you're doing all that synthesis in your head, right? So, I mean, I tend to pants quite a lot,
mm,
and because I think that that's the creation. Like, I have an idea for sure, but then you've got to come in and you've got to develop it, and that's the creation part. And for pantsers, that kind of all happens in their head. It's a sort of synthesis of story arcs, a
yeah.
4-act structure, which you kind of know in your head intuitively, and then you fit it. I need a beat here, this doesn't quite work. Why? You're not saying that out loud, but it's happening in your head. And I think that you're maybe not giving yourself enough credit for that creative process, which includes an analysis of why this isn't working. It's just in your head. It's
You're
just not on the page.
you're
See, an
probably
editor
probably
does
right.
it on the page, and they might look at the technical aspects
Mm,
of why isn't this working. But in your head, this isn't speaking to me. I need to fix it. How do I fix it?
yeah. See, for me, the like the technical side of writing, like commas, all that stuff. That's not my concern. For me, it's all about the story. If it's not flowing, if it's not working, then I need to stop and figure out exactly how it is. So yeah, I'm probably am editing just in a very ethereal way. Well,
Yeah,
that sounded
it's all
wanky.
it's that's the whole no, it's broader. It's exactly that. It's bringing those things to bear, but they're kind of fluid, and
Yeah,
like you say, they're kind of in your head, and that is an intuitive thing that we do as writers. And I'm not saying that plotters don't do that, because there is still you don't, if you're plotting the whole book and you're writing it
yeah,
effectively, you're coming up with that creation of how those things, you are putting it on the page as a skeleton, and then you write around it, and that skeleton within that you do the pantsing. So you are still doing that, you're just formalizing the process more. I think you don't give yourself enough credit for actually you are editing. You're just doing it in a more fluid way, and not necessarily a formalized way.
see, you speak to anyone who knows me, like my friends, my family, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, Richard never gives himself credit." So it's not just with that.
I think a lot of writers don't. It's a sort of magical process, isn't it? And you
Yeah,
think, how the heck? Sometimes you finish something, you think, how the heck did I write that? And oh, I came up with a really good response to answer to that. And
yeah,
sometimes some stories. I mean, some story. It's interesting too about the stories that resonate for other people, and the thing that you think is great, and the thing that you think, I love this, and then it doesn't work for others, and it seems like, oh, that's one of your weakest, that's probably not my
Yes.
favorite of your stories, and it's, and you think, oh, so
Oh yeah.
sometimes it's hard to know kind of just how you've captured the imagination of a person, and I think that's because readers bring their own experience to a story.
Oh yes, definitely. Um, in it, a short story I wrote for that collection called White Dress. It's the darkest story I've ever written. And a friend of mine read it, and she said to me, "This is the sort of story that if you were suicidally depressed, that's the story that would push you over the edge." I was like, "Geez, thanks."
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That's good feedback though, isn't it?
proud of it. I'm
That's
damn
really,
proud. I'm
yeah.
damn proud of it. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. Not because you're going to incite
oh no, no,
people to do self-harm, but
no, no.
nevertheless, that's really good feedback.
Yeah, it's just that's the thing. Because as we've just proved, I don't give myself enough credit for things. And when it comes to my own writing, I'm very much, really, you really like this? Oh, okay, cool, thanks. Don't know why, but okay, if it resonates, great.
Yeah.
I wrote it because I wrote it because I thought it'd be a good story. That's my reaction to my own work. But I mean, that's it's different for everyone.
Yeah, and these conversations that you have with other writers is really enlightening, isn't it? Because
Oh
people
yeah,
do have such a different process, and I, and I love reading other writers' work for that, to see, how they've written themselves out of corners and things. It's
yeah.
fascinating. It's
Oh,
absolutely
oh,
fascinating.
definitely,
And
definitely.
and you can't be a writer without the reading. I mean, I know you said this earlier, I need to, if I could read all these books, but then I wouldn't be writing. But actually, we do need to be doing both. We need to be analyzing, seeing what's current. Other writers have really great way, and not because you're stealing it,
Oh
no,
no,
not just, but just to understand what's current and how other people have done it. And there's always there's no new stories, but there are always new ways of doing things.
uh
And
huh. I've said it like with my little tribe of the tribe of authors I've got around me. I've said to a couple of them that yeah, same thing. There's no original stories. We're just doing remixes.
yeah, in different ways and different contexts, and there are some groundbreaking stories, that approach things in different ways. You think, oh, wow, and then you'll get a spate of those perhaps, but it's
Yeah.
really good to know. So I do think we have to have our finger on the pulse a little
Oh
bit
no.
to see what people are enjoying and reading, and because as time moves on, our preferences change. I think back in the day, for example, I always use this example, if you reading Wuthering Heights, which was very popular, beautiful dark fiction, very poetic and lyrical. And yet, there was this, first of all, there's this outside narrator.
Yeah.
We want to be in the head of the characters now, don't we, as readers? We want to experience the story as the character is experiencing it. And secondly, there's 4 pages of description of the moors. Well, we don't have time for that shit
Yep.
now. Just get us to the story, for goodness sake. And a film would do that with a little bit of a little bit of atmosphere, and you'd get the zoom in on the
Hmm.
setting or something. And I think with our action horror, we really need to be thinking cinematically, don't we?
Well,
Because that is, people have short attention spans. So this is what I mean about these trends and the way that writing has moved forward. We're not looking at omniscient points of view. We want
yeah.
to know how the characters are thinking, even if you've got several characters who are telling the story. So you've got some kind of ensemble or mosaic novel. We do want to know what the characters are thinking. It's all very, even in a plot driven novel, it's character driven.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's a bit of both. And so yeah, so I think that that we do need to be reading to know what these trends are.
Oh definitely. And see, in a way, I break the rule of reading because I do read books, but I predominantly more watch movies because my writing career, I spent 10 years writing movie scripts. So everything I write comes
Ah,
from a
interesting.
cinematic standpoint already. So for me, I will read books. I'm happy. I love reading books, but I will devour a movie and I'll do all that. I'll dissect a movie. I'll figure all that out. So when people say, "Oh, you need to read to write," I'm like, not really. You don't need to read. You just read. You just need to devour creative
The
works.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just yeah, that's it.
absolutely. My children have this running joke because I'll be watching a movie and I'll give this I'll quote I'll say I'll cite what the person's going to say, the character's going to say next,
Yes.
and then I'll just guess because I don't really know, but then they'll go, oh mum, you should write this stuff. It was
Oh,
just a joke,
yeah,
standing joke. You should write this stuff, mum.
same
Oh,
thing.
funny.
I do that all the time, and with my ex-wife and girlfriends and my family, they get to a point like, just shut up, will you? Don't. You're going to spoil it. But when that
Oh
happens,
dear.
and you tell me, I think that's just a sign that you're a good storyteller. Really.
Or maybe it's just we're predictable. Like there is a
True.
certain predictability to certain sorts of
Oh,
movies. So if you're watching a Die Hard, you know that in Act 4, the baddie's going to come back, and
well, yeah, true. But
he's going to, he wasn't really dead or something. Or there'll be
that's
a jump scare. But maybe. But we do know the trends. We know what people
yes.
like, and that's the important thing is.
Yep.
And also, you want to be one step ahead of that stuff, don't you?
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Mm.
Definitely. So, what would be, if you were given like a minute to give the ultimate piece of writing advice to
Oh, read the submission guidelines.
okay. That was
Read the submission guidelines would be my, like, yeah. I don't know how many times I've told mentees this and that, set it up like write, shun modern
yep.
formatting, make it clean. I mean, in that way, look, publishers want to read your writing. They want good stories. They are desperate for good stories because they cannot publish nothing. They have to have good content. So of course they want your story, but they don't want to be wasting time sifting through typos and cramped writing, and if they've got 70 other stories to read today or check through today because they've got 70 things come across their
Yep.
desk, then they need a way of culling them. And so don't make your story that story, and the only way to do that is to read the submission guidelines. Don't send them a vampire story if they don't ask for vampire stories. It doesn't matter if your vampire is sparkly, they don't want it, so don't send it. You find the right market and read the submission guidelines. So that would be my one big piece of advice. My other one is verbing. Verbs are where the power is. Leave the adjectives out and the adverbs out, and use a good verb. Use a really strong verb. That verbs are where the power is. Verbing is where the power is.
Okay. That one, that's a new one for me. I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna take that advice.
I think you already do, Richard.
Probably,
Because
but
seen
more
some of
active.
your work, and it's lots of fun. Your work, very action oriented, and lots of chompy stuff, which of course
Oh
we
yeah.
all love.
And I mean that's something I've with the other authors I've had on, I've talked to them about this thing I have called the rule of fun, which is if I'm having fun writing something, I know for a fact the
Totally.
readers are going to have fun with it too. And reading like Into the Mist and the other things you've written that I've finally gotten to read, just because of my list, I get the same feeling that you're enjoying it as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think as soon as we don't enjoy it, what's the point? To a certain. I mean, I'm not one of these. Well, I'd love to have the money, but if someone wants to hand me $2 million in advance for my novel, sure. But at the end of the day, it's exciting readers, and it's having fun with
Yep,
the words, and inspiring new readers, and yeah, that's kind of the joy of it, isn't it? So.
definitely. Oh yes. And you that you earlier about a millennia ago, you mentioned that
Yes, it does seem like we've been talking for a while now, doesn't it?
almost 2 hours, which
Wow, wow.
it's
Must be toilet break time soon. But anyway, what were you saying?
so earlier you mentioned you posted on your Facebook page about that question about literary success, and I know I answered. What's your definition of literary success?
Yeah, that's really good. And I think it's kindness. And have said this. I sometimes do this little presentation and about literary. literary goal setting, and one of the things that really resonates for me is kindness. And I look at all the kindness of the other writers that I've, that have shown me kindness, and that's the writer I want to be. And I think of people like Jonathan Mabry and my own New Zealand mentors, Graham Lay and Jenny Arganti, and and Greg Beck, for example,
Hmm.
and just Tim Wagoner. People are just absolutely so kind to me, and I want to be that writer. I want to, and recently Steve Shred put up. I blurbed one of his latest books. I think it's called Something in the Sky. Oh, it's gone. The title's just gone out of my head. It's very rude of me. Wonderful little book, really innovative, and I blurbed it for him, and it's just recently come out, and he said, oh, this is Lee Murray. She's one of the kindest people in the industry. And I think, wow. And to me, that's just like, that's lovely to be known as that person. uh, I don't know that I entirely am, but to me, that just felt, that just felt amazing. And the other thing that is really nice, and because I also write for children, is when they send you a picture,
Yeah.
it's just that here's a picture of your monster, or here's a picture of, my picture of your character in this situation. And that's just, that is, there's, when a kid sends you a note and says you're my favorite author, that's just, that's day made, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's just day made. So kindness, and being able to inspire young readers is kind of, those are the probably the two things that really resonate for me as literary success. I would love to crack the Creative New Zealand funding applications too. If the, 38 goes there, then that would be really nice. And I still haven't managed that one, but hey, yeah.
One day it'll happen.
Yeah,
One day.
yeah. No, I think it's a bit like the lottery. I don't think one day. I think they're never going to fund me. But hey, too bad. Too bad, too bad.
They're
I'll just
lost.
have to move the goalposts and decide on some other form of literary success. I mean, a lot of people say the movie thing, and
Hmm.
I've had some movie bites, but I'm a little nervous about the movie industry. And I mean, you were a screenwriter, so you kind of know it's a
Yeah.
very, it's, yeah, if the writing business is difficult, the movie business is just so fickle. And someone said to me recently, the thing about movies is that it's yes, 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 yes until it's a no. And with
Uh-huh.
books, it's kind of a no, no, no until it's a yes. And I thought that was very insightful, because it does seem like the movie industry will court you for your ideas, and will court you for the stories, and I have had a bit of that, but nothing has ever been concrete. No one's ever actually signed on the dotted, said
Yeah.
sign here on the dotted line and we'll give you the money. And and that's the tricky thing. So for a lot of people, I think the movie deal is the epitome of, your story is good enough to be a movie. And I'm not sure I'm not sure that is for me. I used Well, here's the story. My husband's dream is for me to have Tane McKenna become Dwayne Johnson needs to play Tane McKenna, and for him, the dream is that Dwayne Johnson will come to New Zealand, and he has lived here and been to school here, um, and and he comes out to play Tane McKenna. Who wouldn't he be cool? Wouldn't he be cool?
Actually,
And that Samoan background. Well,
yeah.
my character has Maori background, and and he gets to go to the gym with Dave. Hey, Dave, my husband wants to take him to the local gym and say, "Hey, I've brought my friend Dwayne Johnson to the gym, and can you give him a guest pass?" And that's his dream. That's my husband's dream for my work. So
That's a
I
good dream.
obviously haven't made literary success just yet, but when that happens, I'll know I've made it. Oh dear.
I can just picture him doing the New Zealand accent as well. It would be amazing.
Yeah, he'd be so cool. He'd be really cool in that. And yeah, I think he'd be really cool in that. In
Oh
that.
yeah.
And I'd like to see Temuera Morrison maybe,
Hmm.
or Curtis. What's his name? Speed, whatever, anyway, I'd like to see one of them play Temura. That would be really cool. But hey, I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. The feature films are in the, even the low budget are in the
Yeah.
50 million, and who's got that kind of money? So
Yeah, of
not
course.
me, not me. So anyway, yes, be kind. That's literary success. Being known as a kind writer and resonating for readers, I think that's
Well,
enough.
I can definitely vouch with our interactions and even with today. Yeah, you definitely are one of the kindest authors I've spoken to. So
Oh,
no, like no bullshit. You definitely are.
thank you. That's
So
very nice of you to say.
I'd say, yeah, you definitely are. As far as that goal, yeah, you're definitely there.
Yeah, yes. Well, I'm sure that there's still things to do. There's
Oh
still
yeah,
things to do. There's always things to do. But that's the plan. That's yeah. That's still always been my goal. It's kind of and also that I try and do what I can do, and that comes from Horton the elephant.
hmm
An elephant's faithful 100%. I mean what I said, and I said what I meant, or however it goes. And those are those are the things to live by. So.
and that's well, Dr. Seuss has never steered anyone wrong, no matter what cancel culture says. So that's actually, yeah, that's really. I think if everyone had that sort of goal, then the world would be a better place, not just in publishing, but in general.
Yeah, I mean that is a kind of neat, and my dad read that Horton to me, and he had the best voices, and that is good. If you say you'll do something, you follow through, and it's tough when you're a chipmunker like me. But yeah. Anyway, I guess I should let you go to your afternoon because I've been rabbiting on
No,
here for
no,
so
no, it's okay.
long.
No, luckily my like once on Saturdays from Mexico, I give one class and I'm done for the day, so it's fine. But you're right. You did say, getting time for a toilet break, so definitely, you'll have to come back on. I'm happy to have you back on any time because this was brilliant.
This was so fun, wasn't it fun? I think
Yes,
it's that Sunday afternoon, that Sunday morning thing, there's no pressure. We don't have to go any well.
exactly.
So yeah. No, that I'd love to come back. Thank you. That would be fabulous. That would
Great.
be fabulous.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Anytime really. You got something you want to talk about, you can just let me know and we'll organize a date and time.
Okay, let's do that. That's nice. Well, maybe when you're back in Australia too, we'll see
Yes.
how that goes. Cause good luck for the move. I hope it goes good.
Thank you. Yeah, that'll be
Yeah, it's a
May or June. That'll be all happening. So
Oh, that's fairly soon then. So that's a big move, and especially in COVID. So wishing you the best of luck
thank
for that.
thank you
I
very
hope it
much.
goes well.
Yeah,
I think
during
Australia's doing okay, actually,
yeah,
with the whole COVID thing.
from
So
what my parents have told me, yeah, they're doing really fine. Um, they're rolling out the vaccine and everything. This is how good it is in Australia at the moment. My parents bought a new car. That shows you how good it is. They went and bought a new car. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. When I get myself settled back in and all that, yeah, we'll definitely have to do this again.
Oh, I'd love to do this again and see, your new space
Oh
and hear
yes,
about that novel for May. So I'd love to, yeah, let's make a date to talk about that new novel and what's coming out, and
oh
that'll be fun. I'd
yep,
enjoy that.
definitely, yep, definitely. So
All right.
where can everyone find you first before we end? Where can everyone find you on
Oh,
the?
well, I'm on social media, but I also have a website, leemurray.info. So if you want to go there and have a wee look, I'm pretty crap at Twitter and Instagram. I need to do better there. My kids are going, yeah, mum, you're useless at that. So I'm kind of on Facebook, but definitely leemurray.info. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I put something out well, actually I only put something out like 4 times a year, so it's not very spammy, but I do offer free books quite a lot, and also free books by my colleagues. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I hope that people will join me there and see what's up. So
Okay, I'll put the links in. I'll put the links to everything, Amazon, your website, all that in the description.
perfect. Thank you. That's
Oh,
very kind.
thank you so much for being on, Lee. It was great.
Lovely to talk with you, Richard. Thank you so much for having me. We'll see you later.
See ya. And once again, a very big thank you to Lee Murray for being on. You can find her works at Amazon. Links for everything is in the description below. And if you do enjoy the video, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. If you have any other authors, science fiction or horror, that you would like to see interviewed, please feel free to reach out and let me know.